Hey, howdy, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. How's it going, guys?
Going good.
May the fourth be with you.
And also
Right.
with you. This week on So What, we are talking about B2B influencer marketing measurement. You heard that correctly. This is not an AI focused show. We are talking about B2B influencer marketing measurement. So we're going to talk about what the heck it is. We're going to talk about where it goes wrong. And we're going to talk about how to set up your B2B marketing measurement plan for success. B2B influencer marketing measurement plan. Easy for me to say. So, Chris, where would you like to start?
Let's start with what goes wrong. So, Katie, when you think about, for example, as much as we don't like to use the title, we are all in our own communities influencers, right? You're very prominent in the women in analytics space. John has marketing over coffee. I'm, running around on stages. How do you, as the head honcho of Trust Insights, think about measuring what we're doing?
So those are two different questions: where it goes wrong and how do we measure. And so, so let me start with a little bit. So in our newsletter this week, trustinsights.ai/newsletter, I actually wrote a post about where influencer marketing measurement goes wrong. And one of the big places it goes wrong is a lack of partnership. And so a lot of times when companies are looking to hire an influencer, they already have let's say we were trying to hire an influencer for our digital customer journey reporting. That's something we've already created. So we're trying to find someone to bring in to then endorse the thing that they did not help co-create. And so it could work. It could be fine, but we would have a better chance of success and a better shot at measuring impact if we brought in an influencer who was more of a partner, who could then feel like they had ownership over the thing that we were creating together, and then they would feel more comfortable sharing it with their audience to say, look what I built in partnership with these guys. Now let's figure out how this all works together. So I think there's the lack of partnership, but then in terms of measurement, it's understanding, what you want the outcome to be at all. Are you looking for awareness? Are you looking for revenue? Are you looking for loyalists and evangelists? How are you going to be using the influencer? And you need to actually build out, wait for it, a user story to understand what it is you're going to be doing with this person. So as a CEO, I want to bring on an influencer to help talk about our services so that we can build more awareness for the work that we do. So I'm trying to build awareness. So I already know I'm going to be measuring things like visits to my website, visits to specific services pages, people who are signing up for the newsletter to get more information. I'm not necessarily tracking sales because I just need to build awareness first. So that's my spiel.
No, that's good. I mean, I think it's a good spiel. So then when it comes to the preparation, right, what we have to do to be ready to measure those influencers, how do we do that? We've got the purpose down, right? We know what purpose we're after, which is awareness. Mm-hmm. What do we do next?
You need to figure out, so you know what you want the influencer for, but you need to figure out how you're going to find them, what exactly you want them to do. Is it a, one-time campaign, or is it a long-term relationship? That's going to determine the kind of person you go after, the kinds of campaigns you can run, and then again, sort of what is your intention? Is it awareness? Is it engagement? Is it purchase? Is it evangelism? Is it community? And that's where you're going to start to set up how much of an impact is this influencer having?
Yep. And so we have the purpose, which is awareness. We have the performance measure then, because you mentioned a bunch of stuff on the website, right? Just see visitors to the website and things.
Right.
What about the middle 3 Ps?
So people, process, and platform.
Mm-hmm.
So people, as we were talking about, it depends on the kind of influencer you're going after. And so, you might need someone in terms of people, in terms of staff and resources. Maybe you have someone who is specifically just working to wrangle that influencer. It depends on the kind of influencer they are and how high or low maintenance they tend to be. And I mean that in terms of maybe this is an influencer who has a lot of other things going on, or maybe this is an influencer who can be more solely focused, and dedicated to your specific brand. You need an analyst, you need someone to actually figure out what's happening with the data. Are we making an impact? Are we going up? Are we going down? You need the decision maker. And this could all be the same person, or it could be multiple people. In terms of the process, you need to figure out what the heck we're doing and how are we going to work with the influencer and how are we going to collect data on what the influencer is doing. And again, that comes down to the purpose. Platform, it depends on the purpose. And so if you are doing awareness, you probably want a web tracking system like Google Analytics. If you're doing purchase and conversion, you probably want your, CRM or your accounting system or a combination of things. And then you probably also want some sort of a visualization tool to stand up dashboards like a Looker Studio or a Tableau or, name a thing from the Martech 11,038, which totally rolls right off the tongue.
Totally does. I think you hit on something there that's really important. That is a misconception about B2B influencer marketing measurement, which is I have seen a number of folks saying all you need to do is give them some landing pages or whatever, slap some UTM codes on, and then you know how to measure your influencer marketing. And yeah, no. That is, as the old TV commercials used to go, as a part of a nutritious breakfast, but it is not the whole thing, because again, depending on the objective you're after, that may not be the appropriate measure, right? So maybe traffic is a measure, but traffic can come through a variety of different ways. If you are listening to this episode of So What and you hear about something that we're talking about, Katie just mentioned Tableau. If Katie was an influential person to you, you might go Google and say, what the heck is Tableau? And then you find your way to that website. That's going to come in attributed to organic search, not to what Katie's just said. But there's no doubt you would not have done that search if it hadn't been, A, for Katie to have mentioned it, and B, that Katie was influential enough to you to make you want to go Google that.
Right. And that's harder to track, to draw that direct line. And so that's where you go back into process of how are we tracking the impact? And so maybe, so to your example, Chris, like, if you just give an influencer a landing page with some UTM codes, sure, you can track that and you'll get some data, but chances are if you're working correctly and smartly with an influencer, you're going to have things like, oh, Chris had a conversation about this thing and he mentioned this, so I went and Googled it. How you draw that connection is you start to set up your influencer for success, knowing that, okay, Chris will probably be talking about Tableau, so let's proactively get ahead and give him like a Tableau affiliate link that he can include in his materials, so that when someone goes to that site and then comes to us, like we have some way of tracking what that path was. And so that's just a very simple example, but this goes back to sort of that well thought out influencer program, not just, okay, Chris, go ahead, do what you do. And, we're going to hope for the best, but it's really thinking through all the different angles of, if Chris is on stage and doesn't have anything digital to track, what do we need to provide him in order to make sure it tracks back to us? Or if John is on his podcast and he's talking about a set of tools that we want to be known for, what do we need to provide John that includes our name in the thing that tracks back to us?
John, when you're talking to podcast sponsors, what do you tell them for measurement? Because obviously, if they give you a promo code, like linkedin.com/MOC for $50 towards your first free campaign, that's one way of tracking it. Sure, redemptions. But what about all those other things? What do you tell sponsors about sort of the halo effect of being mentioned on the show? Because the show is an influencer.
Yeah, well, it's Jason Falls actually did a bunch of stuff on this, and I've just stolen everything that he put out there. He really nailed it. He has two major things that you measure. One is priority. When you're talking to influencers, there's three factors that you can look at. It's reach, relevance, and resonance. So, reach is how far does it go? Does it actually cover the full space? But then relevance is important too. Like, if if we're talking about, say, factor meals, eat at home meal plan stuff on Marketing Over Coffee, that's not entirely relevant. I mean, obviously, Marketing Over Coffee listeners are more affluent than the general public, so they're more likely to buy those kinds of services. But it's not like you said, LinkedIn ads, where that's just so in the bullseye. And then resonance is the third part of that too. Like, just because someone has a big following, that doesn't mean they're an authority on the topic. There's a lot and we know tons of people like that have millions of followers, but like, if you take their advice, you're going to crater next week. You like don't want to deal with any of that. So that's the first thing, is selecting who should be there. And the resonance thing is huge for Marketing Over Coffee. And then the tracking side, the ones we always use are sales, awareness, conversion, perception, and traffic. So like, if you can get a direct sale, that's awesome. And that's enough for a lot of folks. They're like, yeah, we got these 5 leads, so I don't care how many listens the show has or how many social media posts there are or whatever. Like, the deals show up, we're cool. But then it's just, you do awareness stuff. You may have to just look in the outside world and see, like, what's your organic website traffic doing? Are you just getting more traffic in general? That can be great. And if tracking links work, cool. That stuff can be gamed too. And, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with that, but it's definitely better than nothing if you don't have anything else.
Okay. And has anyone ever come back and said, yeah, we put this through an uplift model, and here's sort of what the show did for us during our campaign period?
They'd have to know what an uplift model is first.
Yeah, 99% of people are like, we got some leads, this was awesome, or we didn't get any leads, we're going away. Like, it's you have to be if you have a CMO and 20 people in your department, then maybe you're starting to talk about uplift, but that's not the crew that we're rolling with usually.
I feel like, though, uplift modeling is not rocket surgery, right? It's not like you're building an artificial intelligence. It's classical statistics is what it is. And John, as our resident stats expert,
stats number one. But and you see this all the time, right? This is the people that like marketing by the force. They're just like putting stuff out there and like, oh, it didn't work. And then 2 years later, they're like, oh, wait a minute, like 8 of these deals came in from this podcast sponsorship. Maybe we should go back to that. And that's why you have like, This Week in Tech has these sponsors that have been on for 10 years, because they're like, maybe you don't see it immediately, but you do over the long run see it work.
I feel like we need to do something with marketing by the force, because that's perfect for today, and it does describe a lot of the less effective measurement systems.
We see, yeah.
These are not the leads you're looking for.
So how do we start to set people up for success?
So we should probably explain what uplift modeling is first, because that's going to be the technique to demonstrate an influencer, particularly if your goal is not just raw conversions. Like, if your plan is, I want a number of hard sales and I'm going to force people through this funnel, and that's how you want to measure, that's pretty easy to measure, right? That's pretty straightforward to measure. And it's incumbent on the influencer to even agree, like, yes, I will agree to these campaign terms, or no, I'm not doing that because that's stupid. But at least that's the case. Uplift modeling is a sort of statistical subtraction. So what you would do is you would look at the period of time when the influencer was active on your behalf, and then measure everything that was happening during that time. Comments, things from social media, things from your lead generation system, things from your website analytics. Get all that data. And then you'll pull a year, 2 years worth of additional data for those same variables, and use this technique, uplift modeling, or also propensity score modeling, where you'll say, okay, we know every week, for example, we're getting 20 leads from organic search, no matter what. That's what's happening. So whatever number of organic search leads came in during the time when the influencer was active, subtract 20, because we know we're going to get those anyway. It's business as usual. Well, let's take that out. And what good statistical software would do is say, okay, let's get the statistical averages of all the different channels, all the different activities, establish what business as usual looks like for a very similar time period, and then deduct that out. And whatever you're left over with at the end, that's the uplift, right? That's the extra that you got from that minus business as usual. So that's what an uplift model is.
So, question. Um, it sounds like the way you're describing it sounds like it's something that could be very simple in approach. Like it doesn't necessarily have to involve a statistician or a data scientist, if you're keeping it very basic. Or is this what you're describing something that you would need to have a data scientist who can run code on your team in order to do?
You definitely need to be able to use statistical software. It's not machine learning, it's not AI,
Sure.
but it is, if you have someone who knows SPSS, SAS, R, any of the actual stats tools, this would be helpful.
What if you don't have that person on your team, but you're engaging influencers? That's sort of the conundrum that I think a lot of teams will find themselves in, is they want to measure effectively, but they don't necessarily have, a world-class statistician like John Wall on their team.
I mean, one of the things that we have told people forever is whatever you're allocating for your campaign budget, 10 to 25% of the budget should be for measurement. And that would allow you to bring in an agency or a partner to do that for you. Because if you don't allocate that budget, then you're implicitly saying, I'm okay with not measuring it because I've allocated no resources to measure it.
Right. And I'm not disagreeing with you on that point, but I think a lot of companies, teams, they either can't or won't allocate that much money towards measurement. They're being asked like, hey, you have $100,000. I want you to spend $100,000 on the campaign. Just slap together a spreadsheet. So what are the things that somebody who maybe doesn't have that flexibility, who has their hands tied, could be doing to measure?
Well, at the very least, you can do the direct measurement, right? So you can give the influencer, here's your UTM tracking codes, here's your landing pages, right? Here's the things, and we're going to be able to measure a portion of your activity with the understanding that if you don't have access to that statistical modeling, you're not going to be able to tell the indirect effects. I mean, unfortunately, I can't think of any layperson way for you to do those calculations like by hand or in Excel that won't take you months to put it together. And you can. I mean, you would just need to figure out how to do that in Excel and get all the data into Excel to do that. Because it was in a little while, we'll walk through the process of how you actually do this thing. But John, how would you approach it if you were tasked with this and you don't have access to SPSS or R?
Yeah, stats. The problem that you end up with the marketing that tons of companies do, which is, the program runs and the numbers go up, so then the influencer gets credit, or the number goes down and the influencer takes the blame, and nobody's actually going through and looking and saying that, oh, actually, the influencer did this in the worst month of the year seasonally for us. So the fact that, it only went down by X, he's actually hugely, or she is hugely successful because it wasn't as bad as a month as it could be. So the problem, all your results are just not going to be statistically relevant. That's the problem. So, but tons of companies just kind of say, okay, we got a lot of traffic. That's great. Let's do it again. Or, oh no, the CEO feels it didn't go well because, he made fun of his kids last week. And so let's just kill the whole program. It's basically marketing by how the top officer feels that day, which is really, and again, there's tons of people that stumble their way to success with these programs, and the sad one are the folks that are actually doing well and pull the plug on stuff and they don't feel the pain until the next quarter or the quarter after. Like that's the most disappointing part of that.
I guess my question for you, Chris, and this could be, a topic for another day, is, so you're saying that uplift modeling is the way to measure it. Is that the only way? Or is that just your preferred way?
It's not the only way to measure it. Of course not. There are more complicated ways. You could build an actual neural network model to do the inferences. Uplift modeling is the most accessible way that does not require ridiculous amounts of technology to pull it off.
Okay.
It is also, I would call it the tried and true approach, in the same way that, like ARIMA modeling for forecasting is still tried and true. Yes, you can get super fancy AI and get like a 3% improvement on accuracy in your forecasting, but it's like, okay, is that 3% accuracy worth the $1 million you're going to spend on big iron to do it? Probably not. And again, going back to what we were saying earlier, you can look at just raw differences in a time period and say, okay, well, something happened there, but we still can't account for it. I'll give you a real simple example. Let's go into our Google Analytics. And where did I put our Google? There it is. Let's go ahead and shift here. So I'm going to use, we'll use this as a proxy example. When I was speaking in London at the Martechopia conference. So me as the influencer on stage, making a lot of noise on behalf of Trust Insights, right? We can see pretty clearly when I spoke, just on our web traffic alone during that period of time, really went up significantly and then sort of came back down. So what you could do, I'm not saying you should do this because it's statistically not great, is look at a long period of time and essentially slap a ruler on the screen, and look at the period beforehand, what was happening, look at the period afterwards, what was happening, and see what is the delta in this big hefty chunk here, as calling that the extra that you got from that. It's not statistically accurate. It's not mathematically sound, but if you had nothing else, that would be it.
It's a guideline.
Yeah, it's a guy, and you clearly can see, yeah, something happened there.
But for some companies, I would argue that the best they can do is having some kind of a guideline. And so, if you know all the different campaigns that you had running at that time, and you could look at this and then also look at, the channels that were bringing in traffic at that time, then you could start to make some decisions around, was this influencer working for us or not? So, let's just say in this example, like this influencer purely was on stage and their only job was to drive traffic directly to one website, one page on our website. So then we would take out email as a channel. We would take out certain things as channels and then say, did they do their job?
That's right. And this being Google Analytics, you can absolutely do slice and dice that and take out different default channel groupings that assuming your GA4 is set up properly, you would know how to do that, and look at go channel by channel and say, okay, well, organic search traffic increased by this much during the period of time when we know something was happening. And this is actually important to be able to tell what is the period of time when something was happening. So if we look here on March 29th, that's when things started, but you can see it tapers back down to kind of normal right around the 9th, right? So you'll want this information regardless, because it's important to determine what, again, uplift modeling is kind of like retroactive A/B testing, right? Where you're saying, okay, we shouldn't send people to a completely different website because there's a marketing technology operations nightmare there. So we would say, okay, in this period of time, we know the majority of what was happening was from the influencer being active. So now, based on that, what would it look like if they weren't? So that's really what uplift modeling is. It's retroactive A/B testing. Okay, so should we go through and how you actually do the uplift modeling?
Sure.
All right. The first and most important step, and this is going to look real familiar for folks who caught previous live streams. The raw data to do uplift modeling for B2B influencer marketing is the same data you use for marketing mix modeling, because you need to know what's going on with your marketing. So, and the reason I was sort of scrambling before the show to both eat lunch and stuff is because I needed to get updated data for all these different channels. So again, from previous episodes, we need our Google Analytics data. We need our LinkedIn data, our Twitter data, all of our different channels, our email marketing data, our HubSpot data, and so on and so forth. Our podcast performance data. All that gets cleaned and gets glued together in one really big table. And that really big table is the basis for uplift modeling, because it allows us to decide, okay, we need to account for all the business as usual. So again, this is something where you want to invest the time to gather this data from all these different systems and have it in one place. the critical thing to do next is to declare when is this happening? When was the influencer campaign active? So here we see a treatment declaration that when the date is between these dates, which we got from Google Analytics, right? From this here, we're going to say that was when the influence was active. And in doing so, we can then run what's called a propensity score match or a propensity score model. It's going to do the mathematics of what we just talked about, which is figure out the differences between business as usual and the activity.
You should theoretically also have dates of engagement in a contract with an influencer.
For sure.
Like if you don't have a contract with your influencer, that's a whole different topic of where things go wrong.
And Katie had said you wanted to specifically look at website, right? Because it's awareness. Awareness is really important to us. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. We're going to specify the importance. All right, and we should have. Let's make sure we have a match here. Nope, that is in the wrong place. All right, so I've gone through and I've said I want you to go through, do the matching, and let's take a look at what happened. So when this was happening, when this campaign was occurring, we saw a 181% increase in email traffic to the Trust Insights website. We saw a 74% increase in organic social traffic. We saw conversions generically in GA4 up 71%. We saw 54% new users. We saw 12% more referral traffic. We saw 3.5% more organic search traffic. We saw a minor decrease in organic video traffic. So for this period of time, compared to the past, these are the results that we got from this influencer campaign. This is the lift above normal.
And so, going back to the comment about the contract, in this example, Chris, you were on stage. And so, we would assume that you are talking about this on our social channels and mentioning it in our email newsletter and sort of hitting all the different channels that we typically hit as a company. But in your contract with your influencer, you would want to specifically state, this is the channel that we expect you to have an impact on. These are the dates. These are the things. And so for us, it's more general in this example, but with a contract with an influencer, you could get very specific. I want you to post on this specific channel at these times, to these audiences with these keywords, those kinds of things.
Exactly. And what's really important here is that all of these measures, these are looking at activity differences. So whether or not there was a tracking link, whether or not there was a digital download, if you know the period of time when the influencer was active, you can then go ahead and say, run this to see, okay, these differences happened regardless of whether the influencer was driving direct traffic through, scan the QR code on this slide to and have force people to do that. This is uplift modeling. This is what you would do to determine whether or not the influencer had any impact on your marketing, regardless of the direct traffic. Now, it is better to have a call to action in on stage. Like, yes, go to this URL to download the Trust Insights tip sheet for creating ChatGPT prompts. It's certainly better to do that than not. But even if you don't have that, as long as you know the period of time when there was unusual activity, which we saw in Google Analytics, you can build this model. And you can say, okay, these are the results of this. And what this also lets you do, which is really nice, is apples to apples. So maybe you brought in an influencer for a special event, and maybe 2 months from now, you bring in a different influencer. You could run this exact same analysis on that second influencer and say, what's the difference? Like, who did better? And because you're looking at these variables, you can do an apples to apples and say, well, this influencer got us 74% more organic social traffic. This one got us 72%. This one's the better one.
If they're doing the same thing.
If they're doing the same thing, exactly. And again, that goes back to the user story.
Mm-hmm. John, as a statistician, does this check out?
This is rock solid. It comes out of the tool, so you don't even question it.
So I guess I'm still stuck on, you know, more of the stripped down, like setting up the measurement plan. And so you're showing the technique to actually measure the data, but where would you have someone start if they said, we want to bring on an influencer? How do we put a plan together?
Obviously with the 5 Ps, right? What's the purpose? How are you going to identify the person? What process are you going to use to do the influencer activation, right? Is it speaking? Is it an ebook? Is it this, that, the other thing? The platform is going to be contingent upon what the activation is. And then on the performance side, here's my big question. What measurement systems do you have in place, and are they correct? Because if they're not, right, if you're like in our case, we're using as the proxy of Google Analytics 4's default channel groupings. So we know that our tagging and tracking for everything we're doing is as correct as we can make it. If you don't have that in place, if your GA4 data is hosed already, then it's not going to be helpful for you. And really, before you do an influencer activation, you should be thinking to yourself, man, maybe I should fix my measurement systems.
Well, I mean, and that's true of pretty much everything. And so, I did say at the top of the episode, this wasn't about artificial intelligence, but if you're running an influencer campaign, if you're looking to bring in artificial intelligence, if you want to run a Google Ads campaign, that's all well and good, but you're already failing if you don't have the basics of your data set up, your foundational data set up, because you won't be able to measure it correctly. And that's true across any marketing campaign that you try to run or any technology that you try to bring in-house. You cannot skip the step of setting up your foundational data correctly. Oh, and by the way, there's less than 60 days until Google Analytics switches over to Google Analytics 4. And so if you're not ready to hire an agency and you want to DIY it, you can take our Trust Insights course at trustinsights.ai/GA4 course and give it a go.
Or just hire us.
Yeah, you can talk to John, our chief statistician, about what it is that you need.
So yeah, that would be where you would get started, is how well are you measuring what you've already got, and then what are the expectations of the influencer? How would the influencer, if they're a professional influencer in the B2B marketing space, they should be more than accustomed to people saying, yeah, we're going to be checking our marketing automation system for activity from you. We're going to be checking our CRM for references to you. We're going to be looking at website forms to see how many people talked about you as the referring source. B2B influencer marketing is actually easier to measure than B2C because it's smaller scale. Right? You're not going to have 100 million Taylor Swift fans just show up all at once on your website and do the attribution that way. You're going to have somebody like our friend Ashley Zeckman driving a very specific targeted crowd. And B, because we have these systems like marketing automation and CRM software, you should be able to see those levels of activities in every part of the customer journey. So you absolutely should have a sense of from the influencer of what they think they can impact, what they know they can impact. When we talk about stuff like me speaking at an event, if an event selects our premium package, it includes things like a call out in one or both of our newsletters, and so we can say to that event then, hey, you should expect this amount of traffic from email because we know what the stats are on our email marketing. So if you were to engage an influencer and that influencer's got a huge list like our friend Ann Handley, you should absolutely expect to see X, Y, or Z. And to your point, Katie, that's something that you might want to have a chat with the influencer and with your legal team about what those expectations should be. So almost like a service level agreement.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like any relationship. You just want to make sure you're setting the correct expectations so that you're getting what you need. They understand what you're asking of them, and then together you can measure correctly what's happening. Chris, when we worked at the agency, a lot of the teams would bring on influencers to help their brands. And we saw a lot of missteps happen specifically around that expectation setting. So very short anecdote, one of the brands brought on a very well-known person, a celebrity, and failed to set expectations around what that person should be doing. So they paid, six figures for this person to pretty much not do anything, but they had no leg to stand on because nowhere in the contract did it actually say, we want you doing X. So when they went back to that influencer and said, why didn't you do X? The influencer said, because you didn't tell me you wanted that, but my contract's expired, so we're good. I took my money and ran.
$140,000 for 2 Instagram posts. That was it. Yeah, they neglected to do any kind of measurement whatsoever. Even in that case, if you're just talking raw awareness, the least you could have done was say, we're going to track organic searches for this product name. We're going to see if there's any change in the number of people searching for the product name, that at that event or in the 7 days following. And if there was, then okay, yeah, maybe we could attribute that, or, even if they didn't have uplift modeling, even if there's just a statistically different median in that period, like, okay, yes, something happened there that might or might not be able to trace back to. But yeah, they didn't do any of that. And so there was no way to say, yep, this is what your 140 grand bought you.
That ends poorly. That always ends poorly.
It is, except for the influencer, they got 140 grand.
Well, and that's exactly it. And so it's, as you're talking about that service level agreement, that's true of influencers, that's true of products, that's true of anything, any sort of exchange of services or good. If you are not clearly stating the expectations, then, you're going to be out a lot of money.
You get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you don't ask for it, you don't get it.
Sure.
So that's B2B influencer marketing measurement. It is the I guess the gold standard is uplift modeling, to say, okay, based on the goals and the purpose, what happened and how is it different than business as usual?
And I would say to that, because again, I always go back to, do people have these skills in-house? If you don't, we do. And if you are running B2B influencer marketing programs and want to get more sophisticated with your measurement of the impact of these programs, then reach out to us at trustinsights.ai/contact, and you will get a direct line to John Wall, who can tell you everything you need to know about stats and how we do uplift modeling.
Excellent. Yeah. If you're looking for 1900s era statistics,
You have your abacus in the background.
got my slide rule. Get it done.
All right. I think that's enough for this week. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.